I'm getting to the age now where I just don't care about birthdays, but I appreciate it nonetheless. And when Jim said the Music City Brass got canceled, the first thought I had was, did they do something on Twitter that made somebody mad? Anyways, our passage for tonight is Luke 10, verses 38 through 42. Luke 10, 38 through 42. Which says, "Now as they went on their way, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she went up to him and said, 'Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me.' But the Lord answered, 'Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her.'" So last week, as we started this series on technology, which I'm calling Technopoly, based on the title of a book by Neil Postman, we talked about the subtlety of technology, how subtly over time technology changes us. This week, I'm talking about, you could say, the sovereignty of technology. And what I really mean by that is how technology exerts control over our lives, how it expresses a rulership, a sovereignty. And really, I think one of the ways that technology dominates our lives, is really what I'm talking about, is just its constant ability to distract us. And you see distraction in the passage, so we're going to talk about that. I have 2 points. I want to talk about the presence of distractions, and point 2, the need for focus and the cultivation of blessed ignorance, as I'm going to call it. So number 1, the presence of distractions. Jesus says to Martha, it actually describes Martha as being distracted. She's distracted with much serving in this text. The word distracted is a Greek compound word. Those of you who are in my Sunday school or women's Bible study know I love Greek compound words. I always find them fascinating. The word literally means she was being dragged away. The idea is she was being pulled in multiple directions. Now, if you think about the English word distraction, that's a compound word too, right? D-I-S, dis, and traction. So what is traction? It is what makes the tire stick to the road so you don't go skidding all over the place. You take the traction away, what happens? You're just spinning. You're spinning. You're spinning. You're not going anywhere. That's what distraction does to us. It causes our brains to spin, and we don't ever actually land on anything. We don't actually ever go anywhere. And this is something that technology is doing to us greatly. So Neil Postman, in his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, which is very dated, but I still highly recommend it, dated because the internet did not exist when he wrote it. It was mostly about television. So it's a brilliant book in so many ways, but this is his introduction at the very beginning of the book, and it's so good. He says, "We were keeping our eye on 1984. When the year came and the prophecy didn't, thoughtful Americans sang softly in praise of themselves. The roots of liberal democracy had held. Wherever else the terror had happened, we at least had not been visited by Orwellian nightmare." So the book 1984 had not come true. Hooray. He continues, "But we had forgotten that alongside Orwell's dark vision, there was another slightly older, slightly less well-known, equally chilling. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World." Highly recommend the book, by the way. Contrary to common belief, even among the educated, Huxley and Orwell did not prophesy the same thing. Orwell warns that we will be overcome by an externally imposed oppression. But in Huxley's vision, no big brother is required to deprive people of their autonomy, maturity, and history. As he saw it, people will come to love their oppression, to adore the technologies that undo their capacities to think. What Orwell feared were those who would ban books. What Huxley feared was that there would be no reason to ban a book, for there would be no one who wanted to read one. Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information. Huxley feared those who would give us so much information that we would be reduced to passivity and egoism. Orwell feared that the truth would be concealed from us. Huxley feared that the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance. Orwell feared we would become a captive culture. Huxley feared we would become a trivial culture. As Huxley remarked in Brave New World Revisited, the civil libertarians and rationalists who were ever on the alert to oppose tyranny failed to take into account man's almost infinite appetite for distractions. In 1984, Huxley added, "People are controlled by inflicting pain. In Brave New World, they're controlled by inflicting pleasure." In short, Orwell feared that what we hate will ruin us. Huxley feared that what we love will ruin us. This book is about the possibility that Huxley, not Orwell, was right. See, there are certainly elements of 1984 going on in our society. I mean, I was looking today on Not the Bee. I forget what, it was Forbes or something, had a list of banned words that you couldn't use on their website, like can't use the word mankind or fireman because it's gendered. Playing around with words, that's the kind of thing Orwell feared. That we would be dominated and told how we must behave, how we must speak, we'd be under oppression. Huxley, on the other hand, just feared there's going to be so many fun things we can do, so many things we have access to, so many books we can read, so many movies we can watch, that we're just going to be paralyzed by distraction and never really be able to accomplish anything. So I think both of them were right in some ways. Postman, of course, believed that Huxley was more right than Orwell. With the internet, there's so much to read that we don't read. And I don't know if I said last week, somebody told me they liked this line, that you can sometimes go through an existential crisis in a cereal aisle if you don't know which one to eat, because there's so many options. Well, the same things happen with Netflix. The same things happen with that. I mean, just think about all the streaming services. Like, we have Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Discovery Plus, Disney Plus, off the top of my head. You know how much I use them? Maybe a couple times a week. But there's so much there. It's exhausting just to look through the options. I mean, you just spend an hour flipping through Netflix. Oh, that looks interesting, and then you never end up actually watching anything. You're just infinitely scrolling. That phrase was coined by somebody, infinite scroll mode. That's where we end up. And maybe Postman's most telling line is he said that Orwell failed to take into account man's almost infinite appetite for distractions. We like distractions. Because if we have distractions, we don't have to think about what's really going on. We don't have to think about our pain. We don't have to think about our suffering. We don't have to think about the state of our society, etc. I wrote a poem. I shared a couple poems last week, so I thought, why not? I'll share one more. I wrote this one several years ago. Let me put it in context. I said this last week. Douglas Copeland has a line that he fears he'll never get his pre-internet brain back. And I feel that. And this was during the time when I was starting to feel that I was being more tugged into staying on the phone more, watching YouTube more, and the like. I wrote this. If I could just read for a minute or two. Wait, an email just came through. Here's a nice blog. Maybe that will do. There sure are a lot of comments to go through. Now, if I could just read for a minute or two. I've been meaning to read some movie reviews. Wait, I'll look at Facebook for a few. I have a profile picture I want to debut, and some texting I need to do. Now, if I could just read for a minute or two. Wait, a Twitter conversation just ensued. Look at that funny ad for shampoo. I have an electronic reader, do you? Have you seen my Goodreads queue? Now, if I could just read for a minute or two. Wait, I'm too tired. Good night to you. Maybe tomorrow I'll try anew if I can catch up with my Netflix queue. I'm glad y'all liked that. Thank you. That was me describing my spinning brain being distracted. We like distractions. The best illustration of this I've ever seen, some of you have heard me use it, some of you haven't, was in 2014. A group of psychologists conducted an experiment. The experiment was simple. All of the participants involved, all they had to do was enter a room, sit down, and think for 6 to 15 minutes with no distractions. Just sit in a room. If you can make it 6, that's great. If you can make it 15, that's even better. Just sit in the room. Nobody else will be in there with you. You'll have absolute quiet. Just think. It says, but without a cell phone, a book, or a television screen to stare at, the assignment quickly became too much to handle. In fact, even when individuals were given time to prepare for being alone, meaning that they were able to plan what they would think about during the moments of solitude, the participants still found it hard. Timothy Wilson, a psychologist at the University of Virginia and lead author of the study, told the Washington Post, people didn't like it much. So the researchers decided to give each participant the option of doing something else besides just thinking. What they came up with wasn't exactly pleasant because instead of just sitting there, participants were now also allowed to shock themselves as many times as they liked with a device containing a 9-volt battery. Still, for many, that option seemed like a better deal. Most of the people who decided to shock themselves did so on average 7 times. These results baffled researchers. I mean, no one was going to shock themselves by choice, Wilson told the Washington Post in reference to his initial position during the conception of the study, published in Science. One man even gave himself 190 electric shocks over a period of 15 minutes, Wilson told The Atlantic, but his data points weren't included in the final analysis. I'm still just puzzled by that, the scientist said. The title of the article in The Verge was, Humans Prefer Electric Shock to Being Left Alone with Their Thoughts. We have an almost infinite appetite for distraction, even if those distractions are painful. And technology is really, really good at providing distractions. Almost 10 years ago, Michael Posner wrote, information via the internet doubles every 3 months. More information has been produced in the past 30 years than in the previous 5,000. Now, ChatGPT, I think I'm saying that right, these new AI writing devices, imagine how much it's just going to keep speeding up and speeding up. Jordan Peterson said monsters are going to walk on this world again. We have no idea what AI is doing to us. But continuing, he said, Posner said, the Sunday New York Times contains more information than the average person in the 18th century acquired in a lifetime. We are adrift, trying to stay afloat in an endless ocean of constantly repeated facts, news, data, numbers, statistics, reports, surveys, and entertainment. And like I said, that was almost 10 years ago. At that point, information was doubling every 3 months or so on the internet. Here's a recent quote. Experts on how the information is doubling have said that until 1900, it took about 100 years for information to double. By the mid-1900s, it was doubling at a rate of every 25 years. By the early 2000s, every 3 months. Now the experts are telling us it won't be long before it's doubling every 12 hours. You imagine this thing we call the internet, this web, this World Wide Web, imagine a spider's web collecting insects. It's collecting information. And that information is going to be doubling every 12 hours. Just information. We're adrift. And we're going to become more and more adrift. We're going to have access to so much stuff. There are going to be so many things to read that perhaps nobody's going to want to read. An article in 2019, just focusing on YouTube, said 500 hours of video are being uploaded to YouTube every minute. 500 hours a minute. That's 30,000 hours of video uploaded every hour, and 720,000 hours of video are uploaded to YouTube every day. To put this into perspective, it would take you close to 82 years to watch the amount of videos uploaded to YouTube in only an hour. Let that sink in. Spend 82 years without sleeping watching YouTube, and you might end up watching what's uploaded in only an hour. We're adrift, trying to stay afloat in an endless ocean of entertainment and information. That's the idea. The temptation is going to be spinning and not going anywhere. Now, to end this first point, Arthur Boers, he wrote Living into Focus. Again, it's a little dated now, but I recommend it as well. He said we live in an age of systemic distraction. The word systemic is used for a lot of things. He says systemic distraction. I like that. He continues, we live in an age of technologically induced and reinforced attention deficit disorder. Maggie Jackson bluntly writes, we are on the verge of losing our capacity as a society for deep, sustained focus. It is sobering to be reminded by a study that most psychological pathologies are characterized by disorders of attention, and then to consider how our attention may be misdirected and misinformed by technology. So the text with Mary and Martha, you've got Martha, she's distracted just because she's got a lot to do. The application I wanted to make of that to technology is, we live in an age of systemic distraction. And the question is, what can Christians do about it? Well, this leads to the second point. We need to learn to focus in a new way, and we need to cultivate what I'm calling blessed, or you could say willful, ignorance. In our passage, verse 41, the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. The problem with distraction is that it increases anxiety and worry and keeps us from, like Martha here, focusing on something better, as Jesus called it, the good portion. I like that word portion. The Greek for it just literally means a part of something rather than the whole. It means you're in this room, it's a whole, and there's a lot of things that could distract you. But you decide to focus on a part of it, just one thing. You're looking at me. You're trying to focus in on what I'm saying. And that's Mary. In a room full of endless distractions, she's focused in on one thing Jesus calls the good portion. Now, I call this the cultivation of ignorance. And by ignorance, I'm talking about just break the word in half, compound word again. Ignorance. Learning to willfully ignore things that you need to ignore. I think that is one of the most important skills that we can develop as Christians in the modern world. Just learning to ignore stuff that doesn't matter. You get on Twitter, or you get on Instagram, or you get on Facebook, or you get on Netflix or whatever, and there's 1,000 options, and you're just like, no. I've got other things I could be doing that are more productive. I'm going to ignore these endless opportunities and possibilities of things to look at. I'm going to be willfully ignorant, and I'm going to focus on something else. The most valuable asset we have is our attention. Say that again. The most valuable asset we have is our attention. Ask your kids. What's the most important thing you can give to them? Your attention, not ignoring them. I mean, going all the way back, this is off the top of my head. We're going way back here. I was a big fan of Saved by the Bell when I was a kid. And Zach Morris was trash. That's an internet series. But there was a dramatic scene in Saved by the Bell where Zach Morris's dad is constantly, throughout the episode, he's got that old school cell phone, it's like a brick, it's like that thick. And he's doing business deals. He's talking on it all the time. And Zach is a troubled kid, and he's having problems at school, and he needs his dad's attention, and every time he tries to talk to his dad, ring, he gets on the cell phone. Well, he gets a ring near the end of the episode, and he answers it, and on the other end, it's Zach saying, hey, Zach, or hey, Dad, it's me, Zach. And they're in the same room together. And Zach goes, is this the only way I can get your attention now? Got to call you on the phone. The most valuable asset we have is our attention. And that's why everybody wants it. The advertisers know how valuable your attention is. Websites that are trying to get you locked in so that you stay on there all day and click ads, they want your attention. That's all that they want. I've said it many times. Big Back to the Future fan as a kid. Back to the Future 2, they had a gas station with a TV. And as a little kid, I said, that would be amazing. When my mom's pumping gas, I could just sit here and watch TV. It'd be wonderful. And then years later, it comes true. And they all have TVs now. And as soon as you turn on the gas pump, what does it do? It's one of two things. It's either weather forecast, advertisements. They're trying to get you to buy stuff, like go into the gas station, buy a honey bun or a hot dog. They want your attention so they can sell you stuff. Arthur Boers, this is a quote from him. He said, Tom Vanderbilt notes that the more info one is faced with, the less respect and attention one gives. Walter Kim claims that researchers estimate that the average city dweller is exposed to 5,000 advertisements per day. Now, again, this was several years ago. This is probably 6 or 7 years ago. So I can only say that's increased since then. That's up, so 5,000 per day ads, up from 2,000 per day 3 decades ago. We are inundated. It becomes hard to know what is important, what is a priority, what is crucial. As we add distracting technologies into our lives, the flood grows. The truth is that we all have limits to our ability to pay attention. It is a finite resource. At any given moment, we are incapable of focusing on more than a few bits of information at a time. Now, let me piggyback off of this quote from Mark Fetterman from The Cultural Paradox of the Global Village. He says, everyone is vying for the most precious and valuable commodity to be sought, our attention. Think about it. Every advertiser, every potential vendor and company desperately wants your attention and will go to great and sometimes outrageous lengths to obtain it. If attention is the most valuable commodity, our most valued asset, it may be said that the most valuable personal skill to be effective these days is ignorance. Literally, ignore-ance. the ability to selectively and appropriately ignore that which is irrelevant or merely distracting. I love that line there. The most valuable personal skill you can now have is ignorance, the ability to ignore. The ability to ignore distractions, to anchor your mind and not just be spinning through your days. Now, I'll give a couple of illustrations of this. I told you, I'm working through a lot of material here, so I've got a lot of illustrations, a lot of anecdotes, but one of my favorites of all time, I love this bit. Louis C.K., the stand-up comedian, in his infinite wisdom, he's kind of a modern philosopher, you might say, and very funny too. And one of his, these were all done on Conan O'Brien. In one bit, years ago on Conan O'Brien, he said the famous line now that everything is amazing and nobody is happy. That's the modern world. Like we have all this pleasure, all this information, all this entertainment at our fingertips, and yet nobody seems to be happy. In another bit on Conan O'Brien, he was asked by Conan, it was known that Louis C.K. did not want his children to have cell phones. And Conan asked him, why don't you want your kids to have cell phones? And my oldest daughter has a cell phone, okay, I'm going to admit. I'm not just banging on people who give their kids cell phones. Just listen. It's meant to make you think. Quote, well, the other kids have the terrible thing, so my kid has to have the terrible thing. Just because the other kids have stupid phones doesn't mean my kid has to be stupid so he won't feel weird. That's what Louis C.K. said. He continues, you need, as a human being, to be able to build the ability just to be yourself and not be doing something. Just the ability to sit there. See, here's to do this. Awkward, slightly awkward, but we need to have the ability to be able to just do that. Just sit in a room without having to shock ourselves, without having to watch something constantly, without having to touch our phones every 15 seconds and that sort of thing. That's what Louis C.K. is saying. He continues, underneath everything in your life, there's that thing, that empty, forever empty. This is coming from a non-believer. This sounds like a nihilist, but take it for what it's worth. The knowledge that it's all for nothing and you're alone. It's down there. And sometimes when things clear away, say you're in your car and you start going, here it comes. I'm alone. The sadness. Life is tremendously sad just by being in it. That's why we text and drive. Everybody's murdering each other with their cars. But people are willing to risk taking a life and ruining their own because they just don't want to be alone in a car for a second. I was in my car one time and Jungle Land by Bruce Springsteen came on, and it made me really, really sad. I'm just getting sad. I've got to get the phone out and write hi to like 50 people. Just, no, don't, I said to myself. Don't text anybody. Just be sad. Just let the song come, let the sadness come, stand in the way and let it hit you like a truck. And I pulled over and just cried so much, and it was beautiful. Sadness is poetic. You're lucky to live sad moments. Then I had happy feelings because your body has antibodies, happiness that comes rushing in to meet the sadness. And I was grateful to feel sad. And I met that sadness with true, profound happiness. It's because we don't want that first bit of sad. We push it away with the phone. And so you never feel completely sad or completely happy. You just feel kind of satisfied with your products. Then you die. That's why I don't want to get a phone for my kids, Louis C.K. said. He let himself just sit and pay attention to a song for a few moments. And it made him sad, but it was good. It was a good portion for him. It gave meaning to his life. On the other hand, more often than not, we give in to the distractions. Right? We don't just sit there and let it come rushing over. And I watched, any of y'all ever seen Portlandia? Somebody my age has to have seen Portlandia. Well, anyway, Portlandia was a sketch comedy show. It was quite funny. Set in Portland, Oregon. And riffs off of things that go on in Portland, Oregon. And there was a sketch called Did You Read It? And a group of friends are sitting in a coffee shop in Portland, and a lady comes in and sits down at the table with them, and she asks, I'm going to read this because I'll forget all of it. Did you guys read that thing in the New Yorker last month about how gold is an analogy for marriage? And they're like, yeah, they read it. Did you read that thing so somebody responds, did you read that thing in McSweeney's comparing CD tracks and album tracks? Yeah. Did you read that thing in Mother Jones about echo chairs and echo ways to sit? Did you read that thing in Spin about all the festivals? Did you read the New York Times, New York Post, Washington Times, Wall Street Journal? Did you read the skywriting over the river? Did you read the fortune cookie at the restaurant last night? Did you read the thing that guy wrote in the sand on the beach? Did you read the San Francisco Weekly? Did you read the Harper Lampoon? Did you read the Boston Globe? Did you read the closing credits of that movie we watched? Did you read the Bible? Did you read it? Did you read it? Did you read it? And they're just going back and forth. Yes. So they've all read it all. Well, a friend walks in the midst of this conversation with a new edition of the Portland Monthly. And the folks sitting at the table immediately begin coveting it because their friend has something that they haven't read yet. And so they look out the window, and across the street, they see the machine where you get the magazine. So they go racing out across the street to grab their own copies of this magazine. And as they run across the street, they're hit by a car. And then the camera pans up to a sign above the street that says, guess what? Don't walk. Exactly. And so the driver of the car yells out, you idiot, can't you read? The point, it doesn't matter how much attention that you are giving to 1,000 different things when you're not paying attention to the most important things. That's it. And what was Mary's portion in our passage? What was the thing she was focused on? Jesus, right? Jesus can get lost in 1,000 distractions. You can go an entire day and realize your thoughts haven't even flittered toward him because you've had so many flickering things in front of you on screens. Chuck Palahniuk in his novel Fight Club, I love this line. He said, no fear, no distractions, the ability to let that which does not matter truly slide. That's what I'm encouraging. No fear, no distractions, let the stuff that doesn't matter slide. You don't have to read everything. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to know everything that's going on in the news all the time. You really don't. You won't be any less of a person for it. I'll call my dad, and he's retired, so he watches a lot of Fox News. And it's, did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? Did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? And it's all like tragedy and disaster, all of it, going on all over the world. And I'm just like, nope, didn't hear about that, because you got other things to worry about. You don't have to spend all of your time. You don't have to know everything. The Apostle Paul, who is one of the most learned men who ever lived, most culturally intelligent men who ever lived, when he described his ministry to the Corinthians, he said, I resolved to know nothing except Jesus Christ and him crucified. Doesn't mean Paul didn't know anything else. It just means the most important thing was Christ. If you ask Paul about politics, you know what he'd probably say? Jesus is Lord, right? Any subject, he could bring it back to Christ. One of my favorite short story writers, Barry Hannah. Barry Hannah is important. When we lived in Mississippi, I lived right down the street from his childhood home, so I started reading him just because of that fact. But he had a story when he was converted to Christ really late in life, and he was dying. He ended up living a few more years, but he had cancer. He was in a hospital. He had a vision in which Jesus Christ appeared to him, and nothing was said. Jesus said nothing to him. He said something to Jesus. See, this is a temptation for distraction right now. As the choir gets up, just lock in. Just let it slide. See what I did there? You like that? Barry Hannah said, he said to Jesus, I haven't been paying enough attention to you. He said that line, after it came out of his mouth, changed his life. He resolved the rest of his life he was going to pay attention to Jesus. Well, several months ago, I got convicted about my own prayer life, which from that came a series about prayer in my Sunday school class. I felt like my prayer life needed an overhaul because it had become something, it was not what it used to be. Let's put it that way. I used to have a really strict routine prayer life, and I had found myself just praying when I was in the car or just, praying over meals and stuff like that. And I think prayer is one of the primary ways that we focus in on Christ, so I bring that up because back to Arthur Boers, he says a key human capacity, one that has always been understood as crucial to spiritual life, is the ability to pay attention. And William McNamara, he's quoting him, vividly described contemplation as a long, leisurely, loving look at the real, Simone Weil wrote, "Prayer consists of attention. It is the orientation of all of our attention, all the attention of which the soul is capable, toward Christ. The quality of the attention counts for much of the quality of prayer." You want to know why your prayer life isn't what you wish it would be? You need willful ignorance. You need to cultivate attention. Douglas Steer said, "Prayer is paying attention to the deepest thing we know." I love that quote. So I'm going to tell you what I told my Sunday school class this past Sunday. The most important part of your spiritual life is the attention you give to Christ, the attention you give to God. Let's say it that way. And it's also your willingness to be interruptible by God, be distractible by God. You have 1,000 things to distract you. Do you allow God to distract you from time to time? Martin Lloyd-Jones in Preaching and Preachers said that his number one rule of prayer for ministers, but it could apply to anybody, is when you get the impulse to pray, always pray. Don't fight it off. See, you might be in the middle of something and that's a distraction, but you're like, "God, I need to pray about that." He said, "No, that's God distracting you. Give attention. That's a good distraction. Give attention to that distraction." You cannot say to God, "God, I just don't have time. I have 1,000 things to do." That's Martha in the story. You're worried and anxious about many things. "God, I just don't have time for you." The greatest enemies of your interruptibility with God are distraction and hurry. Martha, Martha, you're anxious and troubled about many things. That's a distracted, hurried life. It's a non-focused life. It's a life pulled in 1,000 different directions. So what I'm going to encourage you tonight is you need to slow down. You don't need to know everything, and you need to slow down. There are 1,000 portions out there calling for your attention. The good portion can be drowned out in the wake and in the noise. The most important things you can pay attention to is not the news. It's people and God. Those are the most important things. Chuck Palahniuk said that the first casualty in any war is God. And that's true in the war for your attention. The first casualty in the war for your attention is God, if you do not heed him. Now, thinking about what Louis C.K. said about how you need to experience sadness so that happiness can come rushing in to meet the sadness. That's what the gospel does for us. It gives us that grounded, rooted joy and happiness that we can go back to time after time, so that, I'm trying to be really practical here. I know what it is like to try to sit quietly in a room and just bing in the back of your mind, some hurt that you experienced pops up. Some trauma from when you were like 8 years old. The bully who shot you in the leg with a BB gun. That happened to me. It pops into my mind still. So why? It's so stupid. I'm alive. It didn't kill me. That thing that just comes saying, "Give me your attention." What I've learned to do, and I talk about preaching to yourself all the time, like Psalm 42, 43, preaching to yourself. When you're sitting alone in a room with your thoughts and you're like, "I wish I had a button I could push to just shock myself because it'd be better than this," you have to keep going back to the gospel. You have to keep reminding yourself, no guilt in life, no power in death. This is the power of Christ in me. From life's first cry to final breath, Jesus commands my destiny. That he's working all things together for my good. That he loves me. That he thinks, to John the Baptist, who's wasting away in a prison cell, struggling with his own thoughts, so that he's sending his disciples to Jesus to say, "Hey, are you the Messiah, or should we look for somebody else?" You know what he thought about John? He said, "John's the greatest man who ever lived. But he who's least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he." Point, whatever you think Jesus thinks about you if you're a believer, he thinks you're the best. He loves you, absolutely. He has no animosity, no anger toward you. In this encounter with Martha, he's not angry at Martha. He sounds like a comforting father, right? He's like, "Martha, Martha, you're so anxious, you're so worried about many things. Why don't you just come sit at my feet?" And that's what he's calling us all to do when we experience anxiety and worry and hurry and busyness and distraction. Robert Murray McShane said, famously, "For every look you take at yourself, take 10 looks at Christ." What if we applied that for every look you took at your phone? For every look you took at your tablet, your iPad, your laptop, any device, you could say. I read some research this past week. It said on average, an office worker will check their email 30 times an hour. The average person picks up their phone more than 1,500 times a week. How often you pick up your Bible? That's how often people pick up their phones. That's why Posner wrote, "We're adrift, trying to stay afloat in an endless ocean of constantly repeated facts, news, data, numbers, statistics, reports, surveys, entertainment." End with this encouragement. Hebrews 2:1 says, "We must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it." What have we heard? What's he talking about? He's talking about the gospel. Christ's life, death, resurrection for us, and his call to us to repent and believe and just throw our burdens, cast our cares, our burdens, and our sins upon him. And the author of Hebrews says, you can drift from that. It's a temptation everyone will face to drift. And if you're honest with yourself, if you've lived long enough, you know there are times in your life you've been closer to God than you are right now. Or maybe you're really close right now. 5 years from now, you may not be. There's a constant temptation to drift. So what's the answer to drifting? Hebrews says, pay closer attention. Pay closer attention. The Greek word literally means, compound word again, overabundant attention. It means being obsessed. You need to be obsessed with Christ and what he's done for you and what he's doing in this world. That's how you don't drift. You become more obsessed with Jesus than you are with your phone, or you are with the news, or you are with whatever technology you want to talk about. That's willful ignorance, saying, let that stuff slide. This is what's important. This is what's going to keep me from drifting. And you say, well, but there's so many good things I need to be paying attention to. And that's true. But in 1 Corinthians 7:29, Paul says, this is what I mean, brothers. This is how to live in the world. The appointed time has grown very short. That's Christ's return. From now on, let those who have wives live as though they had none. And somebody's saying, well, my husband's really good at that. But anyway. And those who mourn as though they were not mourning. And those who rejoice as though they were not rejoicing. And those who buy as though they had no goods. And those who deal with the world as though they had no dealings with it. For the present form of this world is passing away. I want you to be free from anxieties. The point he's making is, don't spend all your time worrying about your marriage. Don't spend all your time worrying about grocery store shopping. Don't spend all your time thinking about how long it's going to take your Amazon return to get here. Or me, like McCrory Lane being closed down, checking Facebook, my neighborhood subdivision page every 2 hours to see when, is it open? Is it open? It was so many people were asking that question so many times a day. People just started posting, it's not open. We can be so preoccupied. I love, let those who have wives live as though they had none. It doesn't mean don't care about your wife. Paul's point is, she cannot be number one in your life. If you make her number one in your life, you're going to ruin her, you're going to ruin yourself, and you're going to ruin your marriage. I heard Francis Chan preach a sermon years ago, and I'm not a huge fan of Chan, but I thought this was really good. He was at a marriage and family conference, and he titled his sermon, it was on this passage I just read, he titled it, Don't Focus on the Family. You've heard of focus on the family. Don't focus on, that's what Paul's saying. Don't focus on the family. Love your family, but focus on Christ. That's what your family should be doing, is together focusing on Christ. That's what family life as Christian should look like. I think it's interesting when we talk about paying attention. We use that word, pay. Why do we pay attention? Because your attention costs you something. It means you're going to have to willfully ignore other things to pay the price to focus in on this one thing. The cost of giving your attention to Christ is nothing in comparison to the cost he paid to give his attention to you. My encouragement tonight is learn to focus more on Christ in a world of systemic distraction and to let the things that don't matter slide. That's what's going to keep us from drifting. Let's pray. Father, thank you for allowing us to focus in for a few minutes tonight on what's really important. So many things in the flashy world around us present themselves as the most important thing. We get trapped into the tyranny of the urgent. Everything's beckoning us, saying, I need your attention right now. When in fact of the matter, our attention should be focused on you more than anything else, because that's what's going to keep us drifting. So help us to cultivate the practice of willful ignorance, and to cultivate the ability to focus on the deepest thing that we know. We ask it in Christ's name. Amen. Amen. Thank you all. God bless you.